What does it mean to get well? Probably more than any other time in history, we are inundated with tools, programs, advertisements, and motivational content, which is available to us at our fingertips. I mean, just casually scrolling your phone to check out, you come across all of these things that are attempting to answer the question, what does it mean to get well? It could be a form of an exercise program. It could be a journal that you need that's structured in a certain way that's going to help you achieve your goals. It could be something in forms of a diet or a certain thing that you eat or remove from your diet in order to get you well. We are constantly being asked or shown the answer to the question, what does it mean to get well? According to one survey, the self-improvement market is worth billions of dollars. Okay. In 2019, the self-improvement market valued itself right around $11.6 billion. In 2020, because of everything involved with COVID, that took a little bit less of a bump. It went to 10.5. In 2022, it's projected to be at $13.2 billion. And some estimate by in 2025, the self-improvement industry is right around $14 billion. No matter what the product is, no matter what the program is, no matter what the advertisements are for, the self-improvement market is leading you to answer the question, what does it mean to become well? What does it mean to be the best versions of ourselves, the versions that we are deserved to be, the versions that we are designed to be? And that market targets you and it says, you need this to be well. The question is being asked more and more, whether it's audiobooks, virtual training, meals delivered to your door. You can exercise with lots of people from around the nation and around the world without even leaving your home. If you wanted the diet specifically catered to you, you can click 3 buttons and it's delivered to your doorstep. If you didn't want to go to the library and you didn't want to have to take time, if you have a long commute, you can have audiobooks in your ears. Becoming well is very accessible, right? But what does it really mean to get well? That's a question, honestly, that's been asked throughout history. And as we continue in our journey of Lent, and as we continue in the journey of the Gospel of John, even Jesus himself comes across a man and he asks him the very same question. What does it mean to get well? Today we're going to be in John chapter 5, and I want to invite you to turn there now, whether it's in your phones or in your Bibles, whatever the case is. And I also want to encourage you, we're going to announce this at the end, there are still lots of reading plans in the back. The reading plans are available digitally if you need a picture. It takes us through the Gospel of John in 40 days. Some of you are perfectionists, which means if you miss a day, you can't enter that space again because you risk not being perfect at it, okay? I want to challenge that perfection mindset to say, I give you permission today to skip however many days you missed and just to start whatever day this is in the journey of Lent, okay? So John chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by the 5-colored colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him the question, "Do you want to get well?" Well, John is continuing the story. And what we find is Jesus back in Jerusalem. He's back at the very center of what most people would consider God's activity. And he's there for another feast, a gathering time for all these people who are worshiping God of different religions and races and all of these different things. And Jesus goes up there, and John goes out of his way to describe a place that Jesus would pass. Okay, he describes it as the sheep gate. And there's a lot of debate about this, but more than likely, here's what that is. For all the sheep that were brought into the temple for sacrifices, they would pass through this gate. And in addition to that gate, there would be a little pool there where they would be washed so they could be spiritually and ritually cleansed before they were sacrificed. But this is also a place which is kind of like the backstage, seedy alley of a music venue. Okay? This is kind of the picture that's being painted right now. So you are technically around the venue, this place where this magical thing's going to happen, but you're in the back. And because of that, there were a group of people that were simply waiting for something to change and for something to happen. And John tells us in great detail that there were a lot of people who weren't well who gathered here. People who were blind, who were lame, who were paralyzed. Everybody who was an outcast of society, everybody who was carrying something, everybody who felt because of what they had going on in their lives, whether it's physical or mental or emotional or spiritual, they gathered around this place. And he introduces us to a man that had been there for 38 years. 38 years old. That was actually the average life expectancy of a person during that time period. So this man's entire life had been categorized by what he wasn't. He spent his entire life searching for answers, searching for something to happen, searching for something to change, searching for himself to be able to get well. And he tried every avenue possible. And now, for a long period of his life, he finds himself laying around this pool where they wash sheep in, hoping and praying that something's going to change in his story that is going to make him well. Now, we all know this story. I'm not talking about biblical knowledge. I'm saying that every single one of us knows what it's like to carry something with us that we hope changes. To carry something with us. Whether it's a struggle, or a scar that's been left in our soul or our lives because of what somebody else did, or the thing that we see or don't see in the mirror every time we look at it and we say, I just wish that this would change. It could even be a perception of ourselves, kind of in this mental sphere where we look in ourselves and we see all of our inadequacies. And the reason we're not good enough, and the reason we're not called, and the reason we're not capable, and the reason this person doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. Sometimes what we see are all of those things, and we carry those things. So we may not necessarily be gathered around a pool in the back alley of kind of a venue, but every single one of us knows what it's like to carry something with us, hoping and praying and trying almost everything within our power, every resource that we can possibly have access to in order to make it change. Sometimes it feels like a maze, doesn't it? I sat in a meeting for the recovery-oriented system of care here in town. And what they shared with us was often that people who are trying to get well, whether it's in mental health or addiction or some other form of something that they want to change in their lives, trying to get connected to the right resource or the right thing or the thing that's finally going to start having things falling in line feels like a maze. And some of you have navigated that. Some of you probably today are still on that journey. You're carrying something, you're going through something, the circumstances are putting you in a place where you say, I just want this to change, and you've started navigating, but you find yourself lost, or you find a dead end, or you don't know where you're at, or you've lost sight, or you've lost hope. Ever been with somebody in a corn maze and they give up? Sometimes they just sit down. I don't want to do this anymore. And you're like, you can't sit down. We're literally in the middle of the corn maze. This isn't an option, is it? But sometimes things get so overwhelming that it's not worth continuing the journey because you just see a maze in front of you. And I wonder if this is what this man in John 5 felt like. He probably visited all the shamans that he knew at the time. He probably, with whatever type of offerings that people would give him, he probably went to the temple and tried to buy all these different sacrifices. He might have put different ointments on. He might have had little phylacteries on him, little boxes where he carried all these magical spells, hoping that whatever demon was doing this to him would be finally expelled. And I wonder after 38 years if he had finally decided to lay down. And it's at this where Jesus asked him the question, do you want to get well? If there is one question in the entirety of the gospel story that I would feel comfortable answering as a disciple, it's this one. Yes, he wants to get well. He's nearing the end of his life. This has been his entire life story that we know. Jesus, I don't know everything. You're the Son of God, but I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that he would probably answer, yes, I want to get well. So why is it that when Jesus interacts with this man who has obviously been like this throughout his entire life story, this man who has been placed on the outskirts of the temple of God's activity, the man who has reduced himself to bathing in a dirty bath in order to try to get well or try to get his story, why does Jesus ask him this question? It almost seems redundant, doesn't it? Of all the miracles and all the healings that Jesus has done up to this point, why does he stop and why does John make it a point to say that Jesus asks this man this question? Why does John tell us this story? Why doesn't he just include it to say, Jesus walked by the gate, there was a whole bunch of people who were lame and blind and invalid, and Jesus said, you're cured, and then he went into the temple and he had another confrontation with the Pharisees, who are the bad people in the story. Why doesn't John do that? Here's what I think. Jesus' question isn't redundant. It's revealing. Because what Jesus is really asking this man, in my opinion, and people who are smarter than me seem to point this way as well, he's asking the man the question, what do you think it's going to take for you to get well? What is it? The almighty and powerful God standing right in front of this man, standing right in the middle of his story changing forever, is asking him, what do you think it's going to take to change your story? What the man answers is really revealing. Verse 7. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. There's a belief that when the water stirred, an angel was hovering over, and that is the moment that if you were able to get in the pool when the water was stirring, boom, you're healed. While I'm trying to get in, somebody else goes down ahead of me. Ever watch something from the outside? We do this when we watch shows sometimes, particularly horror movies. Right? The big bad person walks into the house and you see somebody run up the stairs, right? And what do you say in your mind? You say, why are you running up the stairs? That's not the solution. Why are you doing this? There's an insurance commercial that I think made fun of this, right? There's a car running and everybody could jump in and escape, but instead they decide to hide behind all the chainsaws and saw blades and all these other sharp objects, right? Even the villain in the story shakes his head. He's like, what are you doing? And I think when we read this, when Jesus says, do you want to get well? And the man says, well, hey, I can't really get to the pool when the water's stirred, and even if I was able to move, somebody gets in front of me. And we watch this from the outside, and we're saying, how silly are you? The God of the universe, the creator, the powerful, mighty God, the representation of God the Father living and breathing here on earth, and he asked you, what do you think it's going to take for you to get well? And you still point to the pool. This is what I need. And we read that from the outside and we say, what a silly man this is. Don't you know that what you need to get well is something that only the power of Jesus can provide? I really thought about that. But sometimes, I believe the answers that we give to that question, whether it's answering it to ourselves, whether it's talking to other people, whatever it's this own self-narrative, I don't think they're really that different from the man sitting by the pool. During seminary, one of my first years, I was really close to having a nervous breakdown. Can't tell you the cause, can just tell you I ended up in a random counselor's office. Hey, do you offer counseling? And I just sat down. Luckily, I think she kind of saw the distress of the situation. And I went through counseling for years while I was there. And I began to walk through some of the things that I experienced in my home as a child. My home was toxic and violent, and as a result of that, for me, relationships became very pragmatic and utilitarian, right? Love and vulnerability were never a part of, like, what does it mean to have a healthy relationship? A healthy relationship was, you have a house and you have cars and you go to work and they go to work. That's what a relationship looks like. Well, what about sharing feelings? Like, what are those? I don't know what those are. I've heard about them. I've read about them. Because I'm in seminary now, I read lots of books. Towards kind of middle of this counseling journey, I arrived at this place where I said, I just need, in order to become well in this sphere, I just need somebody to say, I'm sorry. That's all I need. And a very wise spiritual mentor in a moment of spiritual direction. It was actually after spiritual direction I had this time where you kind of decompress. And I had this thought come through my mind, and I have no doubts about where it came from. What if that person never tells you they're sorry? What if it's not even mean and malicious? What if they just will never arrive at that place where they realize it, where they're healthy enough where they can communicate it well? What if that never happens? I was holding me becoming well, me moving forward, me getting better, me becoming this best and truest version of myself that I desired to be, and God says I was designed to be. I put all of that in something very similar to a pool that the angel had to come and stir the water, and I had to get in before everybody else. For me, it was this person needs to say they're sorry, and they need to realize everything they ever did to hurt me. What if that never happens? And listen, I know most of you pretty well. And I know that in this room we have different struggles and different stories and different scars and different things that we carry, different sins that we see as a part of our lives, different things that we look at, and we're kind of all going through this maze, right? And our largest temptation when we come to this place in the Lenten journey where we focus on Jesus and we're asking ourselves the question, do you want to get well? Often we're tempted to place ourselves in positions or ask ourselves questions or lean towards programs or lean towards personalities to say, well, if I just do this, then I'm going to be well. And if I can just incorporate this, then I'm going to be well. And if I can just make this part of this, then I'm going to be well. And I wonder if times and moments, if those are no different than this man looking at the pool of water with the most powerful Jesus in front of him and saying, Jesus saying, do you want to get well? And they're saying, well, look at this program, Jesus. Well, look at this person. Well, if I can just incorporate this, Jesus, then this is going to happen. Well, if I can just do this in terms of nutrition. You know what Jesus said to this man? Verse 8. Jesus replied, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." And at once the man was cured, and he picked his mat up, and he walked. The mat was kind of like his home, right? All his personal belongings, his entire story, everything that he had was on this mat. And he had placed it in front of this place and in front of this set of circumstances where he says, I need this to happen in order to get well. And Jesus, with words alone, began to transform this man's story. Because this man's story changing wasn't found in a potion that he got from an herbalist. It wasn't found in wearing a phylactery that he went to the local magician and said, could you pray this prayer over all the gods and angels and demons, and can you put this on my forehead, and can you do this so I could get well? It wasn't found in the percentage that he was capable of tithing to the temple. It was found alone in the power of the words of Jesus being spoke into his story. So when you and I ask ourselves the question today to say, what does it mean to get well? I want us to understand that the beginning of us getting well always starts with the power of Jesus in our story. Now, there are lots of things that can help you get well. Lots of programs. Lots of people. I'm thankful for the counselor that saw a guy that was trying to prove himself but was unraveling at the seams and say, I'm just going to spend time with him. I don't even really know him. It's kind of weird. He just sat down in my office 4 years later. Honestly, probably one of the only reasons that I'm still lovable. Definitely one of the reasons why I'm still married, and definitely one of the other reasons why Beacon still exists to some form, because I would have sabotaged it otherwise. When you ask yourself, what is it going to take for me to get well? Is Jesus a part of that equation? I read this quote by Bob Goff this week on Facebook. In the midst of all these other ads for stuff I needed to get well. Most of the ads I didn't even ask for. Here's what Bob Goff says. The way we deal with uncertainty says a lot about whether Jesus is ahead of us leading or behind us just carrying our stuff. The way you answer that question, what does it mean to be well, reveals whether Jesus is leading you in your journey or he's just behind you carrying the stuff that doesn't fit into programs or personalities or other things that you're trying to do to get well. I'm a huge fan of mental health. I just advocated strongly that part of getting well for some of us in the mental and emotional and relational sphere may actually be sitting down with a trained professional. Some of us, if we're asking the question, well, how do I get well physically? If that's the thing that's most prominent, well, you know what? There's lots of programs and people and things that will lead you in a way designed specifically for you. But is Jesus leading the way there? Because if not, I think we're tempted to copy what's working for other people. Whether it's keto or paleo or any of the other O diets. Okay, listen, those have their place and they work, but every single one of us has a different body, right? And it metabolizes things different, and it works different, and it needs different things, so what works for you doesn't necessarily work for me. And if I'm putting all of my hope in becoming physically well on this guy who this program worked to get him stacked and ripped and everything he wanted in my life, if I say, I need that, well, the problem is, that's not my story, is it? And it's not my body. And it may not work for me. And that's why it's utterly important for us to say, I want Jesus to lead my journey on what it means for us to get well. When I'm facing things that I see, this is overwhelmingly, I want the first step not to be to click on the advertisement for the new journal that's going to help me organize my thoughts. I want the first step to come before the throne of Jesus and to say, you know what? I want your power in my story because I want to get well. And if part of that ends up with me in this journal that helps me organize my thoughts, that's fine. But I want you to lead the way. I don't want you to be behind me just carrying the stuff that doesn't fit in what I'm trying to do at this moment or at this time in my life. There are a lot of good things out there, but Jesus is the best thing. It sounds cheesy. It sounds like an 80s Christian revivalist thing. But it's true. And we can keep searching for other things, but we're probably going to wind up. Where do we usually wind up after we try all these things and it doesn't work? We wind up back at the feet of Jesus. Just say, okay, I'm tired. I'm scared. I've been setting all my eggs in literally my house in front of this thing or this person, and it's not working, and nothing's happening. And every time I try, it's just like the maze. I get lost every time. I just get overwhelmed every time. I get fearful. And in those moments, in those places, in our lives, when we come before the throne of Jesus and say, what are you going to do about it? He says, get up. Pick up your mat and walk. My journey in addiction, and where I found the most power to continue on in my sobriety, it's Jesus. I tried to self-regulate. I tried to moderate. I tried to do all these things by myself. I tried place my mat in front of all these different things. Well, I'm not going to drink on Tuesdays. It's going to be a Wednesday thing. I'm only going to have one. Place my mat through all those things. You know what really changed? When I said, okay, Jesus, I need you to do this. Because I'm incapable of doing this on my own. I've tried and I've ended up in exactly the same place. And I laid down in the middle of the maze of trying to find myself. Jesus delivered for everything I hoped that alcohol promised. Right? I don't know what you're carrying today. I don't know what maze you're navigating. I don't know what questions you carry about yourself or about other people. I don't know what relationship that you're saying, man, this is really a struggle for me. I want something to change. I don't know what sin is constantly coming up, and you find yourself like Paul saying, you know what, I keep doing the things I don't want to do, and I don't understand it, and it needs to change. I want you to hear the words of Jesus as he begins to tell you this in your lives. Get up. Pick up your mat and walk. There are no other words. There's no magical things. Jesus doesn't even do like they did in the Old Testament. He doesn't say, go and wash yourself in the water 7 times. He doesn't say, walk around the temple of Jerusalem 7 times. He doesn't say, I need you to tithe this for so much to do this. I need you to go to church service the rest of your life and get rid and burn all your non-Christian CDs. He doesn't say any of that. His words alone are what exactly is needed for this man to change his story. And if it's true of him, it's true of us here today, because the power of God is not limited to a time period. It's not limited to just one story. It's not limited to just one man. It's not limited to a certain disease, or it has to be so bad. At once, the man was cured. And he picked up his mat and he walked. Was this the end of this man's story? No. There's this really funny confrontation that happens right after with the religious leaders and Jesus. The religious leaders see this man. They say, hey, who did this to you? You can't do this on the Sabbath. And there's this interaction where Jesus says, you know what? What God the Father is doing through me, your rules are just not going to be able to contain. They were actually mad, not because he was healed, because he was carrying his bed. Right? You can't do that. You can't carry your bed on a Saturday. Jesus says, my power isn't limited to your rules or your box. Sorry. But you also see this man, he's cured, right? His story begins to transform, and then later in the same narrative, Jesus comes across him again, and Jesus actually says, hey, listen, you need to stop this. I know that you're cured and everything's great now when you're walking, but you're starting the pattern of beginning not to rely on my power again, and you need to stop. So what does it take, and what does it mean to get well? For me, it means that the power of Jesus is leading my story. No matter where I'm going, no matter where I'm starting, no matter what I'm navigating through, no matter what baggage I'm carrying that wasn't designed for me, no matter what scars other people have left on me, no matter what chains are trying to keep me chained to the past or in darkness, God says, get up and walk. And immediately in our stories, we can have this power inside of us that we can begin to change our stories. Does it fix everything? No. The man still had to do what? He still had to pick up his mat. He still had to learn how to trust his legs. He still had to walk into the temple and do all of these things, but he did it with the power of Jesus. So I'm going to ask you a question now. What is a sphere of your life where you desire to get well? It could be something emotionally, where you get angry and you don't know why. You get sad and you don't know why. It could be something in terms of mentally. You want to break a bad pattern of thinking of how you view yourself or how you view other people or how you view your worth or how you're so inclined to view other people's worth or how we are so inclined to judge other people by their actions and ourselves by our intentions. Maybe it's relationally. Maybe the weight that you are carrying is saying something, I just want this to change. I just want this to get better. I just want this to stop. Whatever it is, I just want this to be restored. Maybe it's spiritually. Maybe you feel like you've been outside of the temple and you've put your mat there and you say, you know what, no matter what I've tried, no matter how I've prayed, no matter how many people have come across my path, no matter how much I've tithed, I still feel like I'm in the back alley and God isn't letting me in the door. Maybe it's physical. Maybe there's something that's been bothering you. Maybe you've been dancing with this idea of getting healthy. Maybe you've actually bought all this stuff, but it's sat in boxes. I've got journals in the back, embarrassingly, that are a quarter to a half full. And I can't bring myself to throw them away because I paid money for them, but I keep buying new ones hoping that that's going to change something. It's a microcosm, right, for all these other things that we do. We were really close to buying a Peloton. Very close. But luckily, I listened to a blog, and here's what he says. If you're not willing to walk 30 minutes a day, what are the chances that you're going to get on the Peloton for 4 hours a day? Not very good, right? You're about ready to drop like $5,000. Say, yes, we want this. This is going to revolutionize. Hey, John, do you want to go for a walk? I don't know. It's not there, right? We didn't buy one, luckily. Still say that about walks, but that's becoming less, okay? So where's the sphere of your life where you want to get well? And normally I would ask you another question, but I'm not going to ask you another question today. I'm going to tell you to pray. Because as nice as this can sound, it doesn't matter what the area is. Because for Jesus, it didn't matter whether the man was blind, whether he was lame, whether he had leprosy, whether he was just there passing by, whether he was the people trying to swindle them out of money. Jesus asks us that question here today in our circumstances. Do you want to get well? So whatever that is for you today, instead of relying on the Peloton or the program or the personality, you may end there, but don't start there. I want you to start today with this. Pray that God would begin or continue to work in His power to help you get well and lead you down the right path. Our paths are different. You want to know why? Because our problems are different. And we're all different people. We may have similar paths, but we're not going to walk them the same way. So today, I want to challenge you. Whatever you are carrying, whatever you are struggling, wherever you find yourself in the maze, whatever goal you're trying to get towards the end of that maze, I want you today to not leave this place without thinking that God can begin to transform and continue to transform that story through His power today. It took one word to totally transform that man's life into something different. And I'm confident today that if we open our arms and our heads and our hearts to what Jesus wants to do in our story, that same power that was available to this man is available to us here today. And the beginning of this journey of transforming for us to get well starts with maybe the words today, God, help me. Would you pray with me? Father, whatever we are carrying here today, whether we are online, whether you hear this later, whether you are here in this room, Father, whatever we are carrying here today, whatever we are navigating, whatever darkness we find ourselves in, Father, we pray today and we invite your power into our stories, that we can begin to get well, whether that's in a mental or relational or emotional or whatever sphere that is, Father, that we find ourselves here today. Father, we pray in your power and in your name to help us to get well and to lead us down the right path to become and continue to become the people that you have designed and that you desire us to be in this world. And Father, if any of us have obstacles, whether that's something that we believe about ourselves or about you, or that we see all these things around us, Father, I pray that today you would remove those in this moment. Remove the obstacles that keep us from moving forward. Remove the obstacles that keep us from truly believing that you are powerful. And move mightily in every single story here. And we ask that together in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.